Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel Niladri English classes. So today I am going to discuss something which appertains to language rather than literature. So today I will be discussing some ins and outs of Précis writing. So let me tell you in the first place what Précis writing actually means. So it's a kind of, we can say, way of summarizing something, basically in which we always try to maintain or retain the originality. The words are basically changed, certain synonyms are used, and the first and foremost thing that we are supposed to be keeping in mind is to make the entire stuff a bit summarized. So it's nothing very difficult. So most of you are basically laboring under this misconception that Précis writing is something very complicated, tough, and blah blah blah. It's not like that. So there are certain fundamental approaches that you are supposed to be acquainted in the first place. So let me tell you. So what are the basic rules as to Précis writing? So what all we are supposed to be doing and remembering, etc., etc. So Précis writing is very much conceptual. So in the first place you should think that how we basically summarize. So you might contradict that we are not in the habit of summarizing stuff, but every one of us always keeps summarizing this thing and that. Like suppose you have watched a movie which is basically of a duration of about 2.5 hours, but when some of your friends who has missed out basically and who hasn't been able to watch the same movie, when he or she comes down to you and wants to know the stuff, the content of the movie, so the feedback you give of the storyline and all the acting and other aspects of the particular movie, so you end up summarizing the entire stuff within maximum say 10-12 minutes. So the movie was of 2.5 hours and your feedback was 10-12 minutes. So it's all summarizing and nothing else. We don't bother to narrate every single line, every single dialogue. So it's basically the gist that we share. So it's very easy in that way. So if you can fathom everything conceptually, it's not at all difficult. So, and when you are writing a Précis, you have to keep in mind that you have to put down the gist only in your own language. So in the first place, as the rule says, the original passage which is basically given for Précis writing, you have to consider that your reproduction of the same has to be 1/3. So 1/3 means if it's 90 words, then yours should be 30. So not exactly. So this is a 5% plus and 5% minus. And in certain cases we can also get to see that exactly 1/3 is not possible. So that size criteria is not the primal one. So it's one of the other facets that you have to keep in mind. So it's not the obvious one. So size has to be there. It has to be considered, but it doesn't necessarily mean that every single Précis has to be converted into its 1/3 of size. It's not that. So then we will first approach that what should be our method, or what should be our approach when we are going to write a Précis during our examination. So I would like to tell you that your first and foremost duty is to read the entire passage at least thrice. So first, when you read the passage, just give it a cursory reading, and then when you are reading it for the second time, you must be very precise and attentive. And then finally, you just browse through the entire stuff, just assuring yourself that you haven't missed out anything. And as I've already told you that the passage, when reproduced, it has to be 1/3 of the original passage in size, and then you should be, and rather you must be, very, very much authentic and original in your reproduction. That means your Précis should be written in your own language. And then as to the editing part, you should not add anything that increases the entire content, because whatever you are trying is basically you are trying to reduce the stuff. And then don't add anything that was not there in the original passage, and then avoid using idioms, phrases, rhetorical languages and all, and then to make sure that it's not very much ornamental, and then you don't need to explain anything because it's not about elaboration, it's all about contraction. And avoid using complex sentences, try to use simple sentences as much as possible. And then do not use direct speech. You have to remember that you cannot use direct speech in your Précis. And then don't use second person. So these are the nitty-gritty that you have to consider, to keep in mind. And then use one word substitution as much as you can. Like suppose the sentence goes like this: this is something which is not warranted by the court of law. So if this is there in your original passage, your produced sentence will be, this is illegal. So you can very well fathom that how very much contracted it is, and how could you do it? You could do it by employing that one word substitution. So then you need to keep in mind that your Précis has to be under all circumstances in one singular paragraph, and then it has to be very much precise and coherent, and then in the end you must just remember that you have to add a very relevant and suitable title. So these are the basic rules as to Précis writing. So let us now attempt one Précis beforehand. So let me first tell you the original passage. Suppose this is what you are offered to make a Précis of. So let me give you the original passage. It's like, long ago there lived a mighty lion in a forest. So one day he was slumbering during the noon, and when he was enjoying his siesta, then a little mouse was playing around. So all of a sudden, the poor creature, who couldn't fathom where he actually was, eventually slipped into one of the nostrils of the lion, and eventually the lion woke up. And as soon as he woke up, he saw that the little mouse was there, and he was pretty much sure that it was the mouse actually that broke his sleep. And he was furious. He was kind of so very much agitated and exasperated that he was about to kill the poor little mouse. And the mouse was very much terrified, and he thought his doomsday has arrived. But finally he tried to convince the mighty lion, just making a prayer that whatever has been done was not intentional. I didn't just notice that it was basically your nostril that I had slipped into. And if you pardon me this time, one day I would be surely of some help to you. And this made the lion really flabbergasted, and he started literally just burst out in some kind of laughter. He couldn't fathom that what kind of help that the little mouse is aspiring to offer him. But somehow he took pity on the poor creature and let it go. And days went by, and before long, one day the lion was ensnared by some hunter, and the snare of the trap was so very much tough because the rope was this thing very thick, that despite vigorous effort, the lion couldn't come out and started roaring in agony and anger. And his roar reached to the little mouse who was just roaming around nearby. And then he recalled that it must have been the same lion who was in some kind of trouble. So he ran down to that particular place and saw that obviously it was the same lion that was in peril. So immediately he went to the lion and just got close to the snare, and he nibbled through the tough rope of the snare and thus freed the lion. And the lion felt very, very much gratified, and they became good friends from there. So this is, children, the original passage that you are provided with to make a summary or Précis, whatever. So let me remind you in this particular stage that there's a very little difference between a Précis and summary when the original passage is descriptive and narrative. So if it's a descriptive passage, your Précis is as good as a summary, and if it's a narrative passage, it's all the same. But if the passage, the original passage, is a reflective one, then your Précis has to be a little bit different. But fortunately or unfortunately, most of the passages that you are offered to basically solve are either this thing descriptive or narrative. So this is basically a descriptive passage which I have just told you, and now let us attempt the summary or the Précis of the particular passage. So talking about the title, so we can very easily just put the title The Lion and the Mouse, and then our Précis would be like this. One day a little mouse got into one of the nostrils of a big lion by mistake, and the angry lion got up and wanted to kill it, but ultimately let it go when it begged for mercy and promised him some future help. Before long, the lion was ensnared by some hunters, and he could not free himself from the trap. The poor little mouse went to help him, and finally he cut through the strong rope of the snare and freed him. And finally they became friends. So just see what the length or the volume of the original passage was and what the volume of the Précis is. So you can very easily fathom the trick. So there is nothing intricate, nothing complicated, nothing serious in the affair of Précis writing. Just take it something as very, very much conceptual. So your Précis is basically written in your brain only. So the little thing that you are supposed to be doing is to just put it on your pen and paper. Okay, so it's very, very easy. So if you want to acquire a kind of mastery in Précis writing, the only and the most simple suggestion from my end is just keep on practicing as much as you can. Thank you very much. So let me reiterate once more, if you have been benefited, if you think that it's useful, please share, like and subscribe my channel. So thank you once again.